So welcome everyone, and I see Mary Jane popping in. Welcome Mary Jane as well. So welcome to everyone joining us today, those who are over 50 and everyone else who is interested to know more about this Wize generation. This special online conversation is hosted by the Wize Move Society, the online community for everyone who is over 50 and all those who just love to join us. So during our last summit, Boomer or Bloomer, what's next in April, we experienced again that this generation is growing by the day. We are living longer, are longer healthy and active, and we are better educated than ever. This generation is not on their way out. We're definitely part of the future. So it was again a huge wake-up call that this generation will impact in many ways our society, our economy, the workplace, our healthcare system, and so much more in the years to come. And with this Tuesday live conversation, we aim to give you a glimpse of what is happening online on the Wize Move Society, and to share a bit about both the challenges and the opportunities that the over 50 are facing, as well as how the members of the Wize Move Society work together to create the solutions and play an active role in society and the economy. For those who join us on Zoom, welcome. We love you to contribute to the conversation. If you join us on Facebook, please share your feedback, your questions in the comments. And if you're listening on Spotify, just send us your questions afterwards and we will respond. So my name is Ingun Bol. I'm the creator of the Wize Move Society. I'm here today with my co-host, Dr. Tatiana Rowson, and our special guests, Sunita Singh Maclaren and Dr. Noel Maclaren. Dr. Noel Maclaren is an award-winning scientist. He headed a specialty clinic in Manhattan for endocrinology, difficult word, and metabolism for over 20 years. He has served on the faculty of Cornell University and Johns Hopkins, among others. Mrs. Sunita Singh Maclaren was founder of a cultural consultancy that advised Fortune 500 firms and governmental agencies on local insights for global markets. So for 10 years, she has focused primarily on the intersection between health, culture, and behavior. And today the topic is to maximize our metabolic health. So before we do that, I would like to give my co-host, Dr. Tatiana, the floor so she can share a bit more about her background, and she will pass on the stage to Sunita and Dr. Noel. And they've promised me they will give a short introduction, but will not make it too long because we really want to dive into that conversation. So, Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So welcome everyone. I'm Tatiana Rowson. I'm an academic, a social psychologist and gerontologist, pretty much researching midlife and beyond, and how can we build a life that is fulfilling, that's interesting, and that we can contribute to society and to our wider experiences. And I'm delighted to have Noel and Sunita here. I think we have metabolic health aspects is something that we don't touch enough on, and we should be talking about health more because it's an important, unescapable aspect. But I know that you have more than that to talk to us today. And without further ado and without any delay, I'm just going to jump in and give you the mic and invite you to the room. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, go ahead. We hear you.
I'm Sunita Singh Maclaren, and this is my husband, Noel. And first of all, we want to thank you, Ingun. I'm a great fan of the work you've done for many years, bringing communities of women entrepreneurs together. And I'm ever grateful to my dear friend and colleague, Tina Thompson, for bringing you into my world. And some years ago, I first met Tina when I was doing a lot of work as a cultural consultant, and then did something they tell you never to do, which is to start working with your husband. And Noel had been running a clinic in Manhattan for a good number of years. And if we think about wellness and healing, it's very much a dialogue between biology and culture and behavior. And so it made a lot of sense for us to collaborate our areas of expertise. So we look at the human metabolism from the perspective of medicine and science, but also culture and behavior. And many of you who are listening are very aware that our metabolism defines not just, how energetic we are, but very much our moods and our appearance and our sense of ourselves in the world. And the good news is that what we found through the work in our clinic, working with thousands of patients of many backgrounds, is how dynamic the metabolism is, which means it constantly lends itself for improvement and advancement. And what we'd like to do today is talk about some of the tips and tricks that we've learned in the clinic. So as a starting point to frame this conversation, we'd like to say that as human beings have evolved and as we develop new technologies and new types of ways of measuring the metabolism, paradoxically, our underlying metabolism is less rugged than it was during the age of the hunter-gatherers. And we therefore are in a situation where, for example, in the US, they talk about the missing millions because so many people are dying at a younger age, as we saw during COVID. And a lot of the reason why longevity went down by a startling 3 years during COVID in the US has to do with the prevalence of metabolism-related disorders.
So I'm the other half of our partnership. I'm Dr. Noel Maclaren. I'm an endocrinologist, and I spent, as you rightly said, most of my life in an academic pursuit, basically around things like diabetes, type 1, how to predict it, and with a long-term hope of being able to prevent it. And type 2 diabetes the same. So it's centered around understanding blood sugars and metabolism and so on. And one of the things that tumbled to me over these years is how ignorant the population is about what an appropriate lifestyle should be like. You can think about all of the advices that we medical folks have generated over the years that turn out, when we really examine them properly and scientifically, prove to be not only wrong, but diametrically wrong. So eating eggs, what could be more criminal than that? And now we look at eggs as being an excellent nutrition for you. So we often see mistakes as far as lifestyle, sleep, energy, expenditure, exercise, and food are being quite wrong or not understood properly. So Mayor Bloomberg in New York tried to restrict the sale of 32-ounce Coca-Cola. The amount of sugar in that is astronomical, and wasn't able to. So that's a problem. But sometimes people get into a metabolic disorder, physical problem, because they make a mistake with lifestyle. So I give you one example of this. He's not elderly, but he was young man in his early 20s who was referred by his local GP because he was tired all the time and had a very low level of testosterone. So when I looked at this, I met this guy who looked thin to me, asked him about his diet. Then he reluctantly admitted that he was looking in the mirror, thought he was gaining weight excessively. So being a computer type, addressed this by an extremely low calorific diet down to less than 600 calories a day. And the extremity of his dieting was such, he told me he counted 17 cashew nuts on the table for his dinner. And that's what he's doing every day. So I thought that he had a nutritional problem, persuaded him to eat, treble his calorie intake. And about 2 months later, he hit a normal level of testosterone and his energy had come back. Now here's a cartoon caricature of somebody who's taking the wrong lifestyle and harming themselves by it. And mostly it's the converse that we see. People have no idea about the calorific value of the food they're eating. And we don't have time to eat. So we stuff the food in to get this activity out of the way so we can get on with our work and so on. So they're not always as this character was.
Yeah, by and large, we've seen people genuinely try to do what's best for them. And they try to find the best solutions that are affordable and in terms of their time and their budgets, etc. What many people don't realize is that 1 in 4 people, by our estimate, are born with underlying dysfunctions in their metabolism. So this number of the population is growing. So from an evolutionary perspective, our metabolism is changing. And whereas this condition is prevalent in families, it's passed down from one family member to another, the way of minimizing its effects is very much through lifestyle and behavior. And just as a quick example, we had this woman in her 30s, she worked on Wall Street, and she was trying to become healthier, like many of our older patients as well. In her case, she was running marathons and ultra marathons, and she still wasn't losing weight. And she came in tears and said, "What am I doing wrong?" And when we did the lab tests on her, what we found was, now, if we take a very simple definition of the metabolism as the means by which the body stores and expends energy, the main regulator of this function is the hormone insulin. So what we found in the case of this young woman was that her body had an underlying insensitivity to insulin, and she was now making 5-folds the so-called normal amounts. And while she was able to function very well, it had a number of side effects. So this is something that has been Noel's specialty.
This lady had insulin resistance syndrome. As Sunita said, it's 25% of the Western adult population so afflicted. Now, this is a lifetime problem. A lot of medicine, we've got that wrong. We thought it was acquired. When you have it, it's permanent. So we can't make it go away. So it makes you very good at gaining weight for the food that you eat. But what's not really well understood by the population, a whole lot of other things that are age and gender related. Let's just start that we see usually people who are insulin resistant, by the time of puberty, they're already there and they will be insulin resistant for good. We see young women who are trying to get pregnant and can't. It's a leading cause of infertility. We see also young women with trouble with acne that is hard to go away, or trouble with facial or body hair that you want to get rid of. Usually when women are a little bit older, they're mortified to find that they're losing hair excessively. So besides the weight gain, there's problems with fatty liver, there's high blood pressure, and of course type 2 diabetes that we talked about. Two other things briefly is that there is a clear increase in Alzheimer's disease associated with type 2 diabetes, and insulin resistance seems to be the underlying mechanism. And even with COVID, people who get into trouble with COVID tend also to be insulin resistant.
So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the solutions that we developed. And in our book, we've written about a matrix of several elements that we think, if you think of it sort of as a Rubik cube, right? There may be different points in your life when you have to give more emphasis to one element over the other. So we all know, for example, about the direct relationship that we have with food. Our relationship with food is continuously evolves through our lives, and it has many cultural components. So, for example, one of the issues that we see is people that are very nurtured to eat rice or cassava or wheat as part of their diet, with underlying insulin resistance or metabolic issues, these get exaggerated. And again, we would contend that the food industry today is where the tobacco industry was some years ago, in that the science of nutrition has galloped far further afield than the food that's being packaged and on the stores of our grocery shelves, where in fact, in many cases, it's over-processed and it's designed to stimulate appetite. Now, there are a few things, again, as Noel was talking about, where people may not be able to separate what they hear from the reality. And so let's talk a little bit about probiotics and prebiotics. And why don't you explain the difference?
The person who opens the magazine is going to find one chapter on the microbiome these days. Turns out that we do have 10 or 20 billion bacteria in our lower small bowel, large bowel area. And these guys are with us for life. And they're good guys. They help process complex foods that we couldn't otherwise digest. And as these, we eat complex carbohydrate foods, for example, we can't digest it except through the use of these bacteria. And as the bacteria thrive on such food, they generate fatty acids, which are very important for our brain function. And they also stimulate insulin correctly. So it improves the insulin response to being insulin resistant. So the way to feed these bacteria is prebiotic foods. Good example in Holland is all of the chicory that you add to your salads. That's good prebiotic nutrition. The commercial industry, however, said, well, that's a good idea. Let's actually eat the bacteria. And the problem with that is it seems abject nonsense to me. One is, our intestines are designed to kill foreign bacteria. We can't establish them, and we can't actually grow the ones we want to keep, so we eat them as well. So probiotics are not an area where we greatly foster, but prebiotics we really enjoy. I think an aside of something Sunita said was, we have a lot of Ukrainian patients in New York, and one of the constant conversations we have is to minimize the borscht that they eat because of the high sugar content.
Yeah, very often people are told beet salad is so healthy, coconut water is so healthy, quinoa, so people go, what, when we say that these kind of foods actually increase your glycemic levels. So the question is, you can't just condemn people and say, well, you can't eat this, you can't. So what we've tried to do is offer substitutes. So for example, instead of wheat, we like, for example, people to use almond flour or buckwheat. So buckwheat has been part of the Eastern European diet, and it's actually, or spelt flour. Noel and I love the fact that everywhere in Holland you can find spelt flour bread. And similarly, we encourage our patients to try different types of cauliflower rice. And so it's more, how do you make those tiny tweaks that begin to accumulate benefits to you?
I am going to, you promised me you wouldn't mind if I just...
Not at all.
Because I know that one way, this is a topic you can talk about for hours and hours, and I see your passion in it. But I am going to ask you a question, because what I hear now, and I've been struggling with this whole situation, for my whole life, and being gluten intolerant, and my weight going up and down and all these things. So I know there are issues that's people have no idea. I think I eat very healthy, but still it doesn't help. So we are facing this aging population. So for this aging population, and people now, for instance, in their 50s, if they do live longer, they want to live healthier longer. That is very important. It is important that they keep their brain healthy so they can work longer. And, so that part of their body needs to be great. Their whole mental part needs to be good. And when I hear you talk, I feel like, oh gosh, so what can we do? And it's not for everyone now to get tested and things like that. Small steps that you feel like, if you do want to change something, and I already hear you say about the wheat and things like that. Small steps that we can take to make our life a little better, because I know that problems with your metabolism also affect your condition, your total, what is happening with you, your muscles, your joints, anything. It is. So what can we do from now on? And then I also would like to hear, but I'm also going to give the floor to all the others. What are we going to do with those who are now very young and probably already are carrying some of these underlying issues? What can you do? Still, the whole health system, well, there are only a couple of countries where they look at prevention, but overall speaking, that is not what we're doing. So I'd love to hear your vision on that.
Nita touched upon what we call a metabolic matrix. We've identified 10 areas that somebody who wants to improve their health and live longer and function can address. We touched upon diet, which is rather a big one. But the other areas you rightly talk about is exercise. Exercise is vital, and as you hear, it's not the only solution. This lady, Sunita, talked about. She exercised to extreme, and it didn't help. She had to diet and get the right amount of sleep, and she had a family history of people with type 2 diabetes. So first thing we say to somebody who wants to do it, this isn't your fault. You're not a bad person doing this to yourself. You've got an underlying metabolic disorder that we need you to understand so that you can address lifestyle things properly. And unfortunately, I'm an MD, and a lot of our colleagues don't seem to get this. So we do need something to bridge the gap and provide appropriate lifestyle advice based on an understanding of a underlying metabolic disorder.
So very specifically, Ingun, to answer your question, it always begins with small steps, right? And consistency. So the first thing might be to examine your nutritional pattern. Are you eating consistently at consistent times? Are you checking the labels of what you're eating? You know, it's none of us don't want to have a treat every now and then, but what we need to understand is that certain foods are hunger producing foods. What are those foods? And those ones are obviously best avoided. And am I getting enough sleep? Because that's a classic way to not only gain weight, but to affect your moods, etc. And I think as we get older, there's a lot of comfort in having routines. So whether it's going for a walk every day, whether, you know, we know from those blue zones, if you meet with your friends and share a glass of wine as a way of reducing stress, that enhances years of your life. That's one of Noel's favorite solutions, by the way. So it's very much, it's small steps, and it's always a work in progress. You know, just as we think of life as a journey of self-awareness and self-improvement, and I think with Wize Moves, your motivation, and one that we recognize, is that we all want to share the knowledge that we have accumulated in these years. We want to share that knowledge. And so I think the idea of being self-aware to say, okay, I know I haven't been sleeping well, or I know I've been getting depressed, you know, what are some things that I can do? Understanding that some things may be out of your control. So for example, we had a lady who'd had a very, very successful career as at a Fortune 500 company. She'd won all kinds of awards as a concert pianist, but before she came home from work, she had to ask her husband to lock all the chocolates away in the house because she could not control her appetite signals. And it wasn't a lack of willpower, right? So the second part of your question on how do we prevent this? So the best prevention is education. The more we can make our young people nutritionally aware of what's going into their bodies. And, you know, we have a number of our patients say, my child would say, what are you doing eating that? Because, you know, they are more aware, and preventing that from going through the cycle. Another obvious way is to identify at-risk populations much earlier on, where we can see young children gaining weight, and to begin to teach them new ways of exercising and managing their diet, etc., and some red flags to watch out, because we know depression is very closely linked to metabolic imbalances, and we're seeing alarming rates of suicide among young people post-COVID. So all of these things.
To the insulin resistance is familial, and we spent billions of dollars to try and identify the genes involved. We haven't been able to generally, but nonetheless it's familial and it's passed on. So one support system is the family, right? Several members of the family join together to help each other, right? And this has been enormously helpful because it clearly identifies you're not a bad person and you're not to blame. This is a familial disorder. The other thing I've often worried about in the population sense is that we need to teach young children how to eat properly. And what will that do? Young children will go home and tell their parents who may have insulin resistance, hey, this is what we've been taught to do. Why are you eating that pint of ice cream or having 2 bowls of borscht or whatever it be? So that's helpful education.
On mute, I was talking. Thank you very much. Yes, that is very, I believe, especially also that helped also people getting off smoking, you know, that the children were telling the parents, you know, why are you doing this? Because it's not good for you. Yeah, I do believe you're absolutely right. Tatiana, I would like to get you into the conversation.
Oh, thank you. I think this conversation is really interesting. And there are a couple of things, Sunita, know that you mentioned that really stuck with me today. And one of them is how people can be harming themselves unintentionally, even in a drive of doing something healthy, cutting down food, exercising more and more. Actually, they're getting the balance wrong. And I think that's a sign that we're living now this fast-paced existence that doesn't allow people to stop and think and reflect and connect with their bodies and their families and all the other things in life that we need to make balanced decisions. So we in this pressure, it doesn't allow us time to make decisions they are good for us. And it's interesting that because in psychology we talk a lot about this idea that people sometimes have a need for closure and easy answers, need for easy answers. So, okay, I will do this. I will have 6 or 7 cashew nuts for dinner. Easy answer. I don't need to engage. I don't need to think. I solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, Sunita, the work in progress mentality is actually, there's no close dead end, and that's really unsettling for most people to set for an ongoing, there's a never-ending goal. The goal is every day in each day, and so on. So I think this is a very important conversation for people to start connecting that health is every day, and health is about making those decisions on a day-to-day basis with a bit more time as well. I was about to say something else, but it escaped my mind now. So I'm gonna let Deborah's questions.
I think, Tatiana, we've seen people come into the clinic with reams of paper that they printed off the internet because every day they read, eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you, fruit is good for you, fruit is bad for you. So there's a lot of confusion, which is understandable because there is not enough filter in terms of giving people nutritional advice. And sometimes people who do so may have another agenda. And, you know, as to your second point about the work in progress, you know, if we think of life, as Noel and I do, as a work in progress, that we are continuously thinking of how we can improve ourselves and be better human beings. And the metabolism gives you so many opportunities to do that. It's never like, oh, you were a bad person when you were in your 20s, so tough luck. We've seen people actually change their life insurance policies for the better because their health outcomes have improved so much over the course of 18 months.
Mhm.
So Sunita, I'm just going to make a comment here, just for the people that are listening to us. There's still time.
Yes.
There's still time. Whatever stage we are, we can actually start reversing the damage we have been doing to our bodies.
We've had
And
people
we have to
in their
start somewhere.
mid-80s.
I'm sorry. Yep, Sunita.
No, I was just saying we've had people in their mid-80s start and do wonders.
Fantastic. Anything, Tatiana, because I see some questions pop up in the chat. Deborah, do you want to start? Deborah is actually, she is one of the teachers on our on the Wise Move Society, very active on healthy, exercise, yoga, mindfulness, breathing, things like that. So Deborah, the floor is yours. And you're muted. We don't hear you.
Hi. This is actually quite exciting because I know a bit about taking care of myself and everybody else taking care of themselves, but this is interesting about the metabolic resistance. So is there an easily accessible test for metabolic resistance?
We have a questionnaire in our book, Deborah. I think our book's available on Amazon. And what we've done in the book is we've provided a questionnaire, and it allows you to identify 1 of 4 metabolic personalities. So if you're a Jade personality, you're not likely to have insulin resistance. And then if you're a Sapphire, you may be in the early stages, or you may be asymptomatic. The Emerald is slightly further along, and the Ruby has medical complications like diabetes. But in each one of these categories, there's so much that a person can do. And in the book, we've made some dietary recommendations for each category and exercise and so on.
Well, so there is no blood test or easily accessible that way to go to your doctor and get a blood test or anything like that?
That's what I was going to say. We people who are insulin resistant, we have some physical signs that go with that. One is apparent, easy to see. Somebody like you could make the diagnosis. It's the outer layer of the skin and the eyelids and around the neck that actually thicken when you have high levels of insulin. It's called acanthosis. So somebody is overweight who, may have family history of type 2 diabetes and other things associated, and you see acanthosis, or sometimes high cortisol levels get striae like you got in the skin when you were pregnant. These are telltale signs.
No, you don't have it. But sometimes people have dark circles around the eyes. That's a very telltale sign. A woman may have a receding hairline. She may have facial hair. These are all telltale signs. Adult acne is another one. So there are some physical features, but obviously there are tests as well that could confirm it.
The blood test we won't go into, but we developed a protein test that is reasonably predictive, but after the age of beginning at 7, usually by teenage years, it's positive or negative or insulin resistant, but you don't really need such a test.
Tina and I are actually interested in what are the hunger producing foods.
So in general, they tend to be in the family of simple carbohydrates. So these would be things like, you know, aside from the usual suspects of rice and bread and potato chips, even fruits, so tropical fruits. I know, Tina, you and I have talked about this in the past. Fructose has been seen to affect cognitive function as well. And in general, Deborah, I think the more food is processed, the more likely it has been designed to stimulate your hunger pangs. And so when you have complex carbohydrates, and here we're talking about things like lentils, chicory, buckwheat is actually a grass. These types of foods stimulate your satiety hormones. And so they give you a much longer feeling of satiety and wellness from that point of view.
You should talk about eat slowly, because you need to have time to develop satiety if you've had enough to eat.
Does that answer your question, Deborah?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. How about you, Tina? Because was that all you wanted to know, or maybe add a little bit more?
So Dr. Noel, you spoke about the prebiotics and you mentioned chicory. What else? What other foods are good for prebiotic?
Yeah, so they're complex carbohydrates. So when Sunita talked about buckwheat rather than rice, this is tending to be complex carbohydrate grain, which is also good. There's a substance called inulin, not insulin, inulin, that is manufactured commercially and actually sold as a prebiotics capsule you can take, and I think there's value even to that.
And also things like artichokes, leeks, they seem to be very beneficial from a health perspective for prebiotics. I don't know if you have a taste for it, but things like kimchi as well. Yeah, me neither, but it has benefits. But if not kimchi, actually food that has been, you know, vegetables like pickled vegetables, you know, they tend to stimulate the microbiomes.
Fermented foods, I think, Sunita, fermented foods.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Anything, Mary Jane, you want to jump in and you have some more comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess one that comes to mind is the relationship between stress and metabolism. You know, you mentioned the cortisol. Yeah, I mean, we know that the higher the stress levels, then there are changes, metabolic changes happening in the body. So can you touch on a little bit on that?
One we talked about quite enough, I think, is that when you're stressed, often it interferes with your sleep. We have a day-night cycle, all of us. We have a big clock in here that regulates our metabolism, as you know, called diurnal rhythm. And it's very important that we have that steady, that you have a routine. But so when we look at body weight for height, BMI, we can see there's absolutely almost linearly correlated with hours of regular sleep that you get. So people on shift work, it's terrible to try and take care of their diabetes because their day is different one to the next, and they tend to gravitate to be overweight. So that's one important way. Stress also is sometimes people eat because they're stressed. That is, get stress relief from food. and sometimes eat food that, as Sunita was saying, actually stimulate more eating. So that's another way that's stress. But cortisol is really an interesting one, because people who produce lots of cortisol because of a disease or because they're given cortisol in excess always get insulin resistance, and they develop as a direct effect. So when we measure cortisol levels, not in the blood, but in the urine, we can see how much is produced in a day. Very often it's raised, but that's fairly inaccurate. A better way to do it is to take hair, right, and measure cortisol level in hair. And when that's done, there's a pretty a good correlation between hair cortisol and the degree of problem from insulin resistance that you have.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, and then one last thing, prebiotica versus probiotica. My understanding has been that probiotica are especially useful if you've been on an antibiotic cure, because a lot of your good bacteria has been destroyed. Would you then recommend it as well as the prebiotic? I mean, you want to encourage the environment for the existing bacteria to grow, but a good bacteria to grow. But so is there a place for probiotica?
Well, forgive me if I do speak to that specifically. People have had recurrent antibiotic doses and really seriously depleted their microbiome, in which case they get overgrowth of pathological bacteria, which can cause chronic diarrhea and impossible to get rid of. And so the specific treatment for that is to use an antibiotic to kill off the bad guys, which works after a fashion. But the real way to do it is to have a fecal emulsion from a healthy person to actually take a dose of microbiome, and that works like a charm. I mean, it's been life-saving.
Does that answer your question, Mary Jane? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I told you that I was also going to make a small shift during this conversation, because today we also announced that the Wize Society has a global collaboration with the Global Center for Experienced Entrepreneurship, the Global Institute for Experienced Entrepreneurship. And actually, you know, we have been talking, you are right now, you are in The Hague in the Netherlands, where I also live. So we had the opportunity to meet over the last couple of weeks. And you have had your clinic in Manhattan, New York, for over 20 years. And now you are considering moving to the Netherlands and build a new business. As experienced entrepreneurs, of course, can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, I think that at our stage in life, right, for all of us, the most gratifying thing is to share our knowledge. And we did reach a point where we wanted to close the medical practice, but we still felt that we had ideas that we wanted to share with the world. And so we looked around to see which parts of the world are metabolically the most appealing, where there's lower levels of stress and access to good nutrition. And we thought that it would be very energizing for us, since we're two gypsies. Noel was born in New Zealand and I was born in India, and we've lived in several countries, to start over, in a sense, not as 20-year-olds, but as people who have maybe sown their wild oats, but now want to be in a place of giving. And also express gratitude for the opportunities that we've been given to learn. And as we have said, our greatest teachers have been our patients. And so we think there could be nothing more stimulating for us than to be in an environment that we really enjoy. And you have a country that's so blessed in many ways. And people like you who are its great ambassadors. And yeah, so we are looking forward to, with a sense of humility, to learning where we can best contribute to the society in which we hope to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful question about prevention. It turned out the deputy mayor of Amsterdam had been troubled with the expat children coming to that were gaining weight excessively, and he could see what was going to happen to them in future. So he was involved in creating an education platform, and we'd love to talk to him some more because we think that's exactly what our society should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Preventing the problem, because as the population ages, problems from insulin resistance like diabetes are going through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be able to prevent those things so they can be more functional longer.
I would say to your Wize Move audience that when you're in your 20s, you can be adventurous and courageous out of maybe a place of sheer optimism and maybe in some cases ignorance. You just are. I think entrepreneurs are genetically optimistic people. And when you're an entrepreneur at our stage in life, it's as optimistic, but perhaps a little more restrained because you've had some experiences, and yet you know that whether this flies off the shelves or it doesn't, it's not going to define the entire person that you are, because you have developed other roles in your life that are meaningful to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Let's make one comment too, that a lot of people, let's say with type 2 diabetes, the conversation with the doctor is somewhat punitive. That is to say, you should be doing these things because you're probably not doing them now, right? And we see things so completely the other way. You see that people have got a metabolic problem. It's not your fault, but because you have, you need, these are the things that we can teach you to do to help you. And as you rightly say, there's no age limit to this. We see people that are 90 improve their health by doing what they should. As long as they don't feel it's hard to motivate yourself if everybody's convinced it's something you're doing to yourself, which is not the case, usually.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there are many, many, many opportunities still for you, and whether that is in the Netherlands or anywhere else. And I just love it that you're not going to sit back and relax and enjoy and smell the roses, but you know that you really, you know, stay active and contribute to this higher goal. And I just love that that attitude. Absolutely. I'm watching the time, so I'm going to make a quick tour. Tatiana, you first. You know, it's a lot has been said, and
It was a
really
wonderful
wonderful. And
conversation.
maybe you should unmute yourself.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a wonderful conversation. So I'm really grateful, Sunita and Noel, for joining us, because it was really rich and compassionate as well when talking about people and their health and how it's not our fault. Sometimes things are not right. and there's a route to improve from there. And I think that really ties well with your reflections on entrepreneurship at this stage. You have so many good things to share. Sometimes entrepreneurship is not just the business or the money or this or that, but it's actually doing something that benefits a wider group of people. And I think it's really, really nice to see, and it's nice to point out for whoever's listening, they might be thinking, I have this one thing I want to bring it forward and share, and why not? Why not? It only adds value. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Mary Jane, some last words from you.
Yeah, really, none specific, but just a very big thank you, and when I'm back in the Netherlands, which is where I live, I'm in West Virginia at this moment, but I hope our paths will cross there too. So thanks again. Yeah.
Hi.
Well, on the way that I've been talking with Sunita and Noel, I discovered that one of the people that is also involved with Wise Move Society has been working with them to really improve her health. And she has lost a lot of weight. She looks amazing. So maybe we need to talk to her as well, so to get some experience there. Tina, thank you first for introducing me to Sunita and Noel. Really lovely couple, and really great to spend time with you. But yeah, you need to be the next, not moving, at least visiting us and spend time with us. Well, Tina, so your last words.
I just want to say I'm also one of those people that has benefited from the enormous experience and know-how and compassion that Noel and Sunita have. It's life-changing. And for me, it wasn't only about being physically healthy and appearance, it was about the brain. And I think we need to keep emphasizing how, what you eat affects your brain. So for me, that's, always a strong, strong motivation for people to teach their children and going forward, for life itself. So thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed seeing you, listening to you, and I'm grateful.
Good to see you.
Great to see you, Tina.
It was great to see you here, Tina. Sunita and Noel, some last words from you.
Well, we just cannot thank you enough, because for us, we feel that we identify so much with the values that Tatiana and you have expressed. And we should have known when Tina said, you've got to meet Ingun, that she had made that match in her mind. We think what you're doing is very important work, and we would love to support you off screen in any way that we can. And we want to encourage you to carry it forward and to continue to brainstorm with you about new subjects and new audiences that can benefit from these global communities that you're building. But we very much applaud your work. So thank you very much for the opportunity and for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing I'd just like to say is that not only do we not blame people, we empower people to do these things for themselves. It's a very positive switch that goes on. I'm important enough to take care of myself properly, and now I know how.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. And this is, of course, also things that we are looking at the Wise Move Society, because longevity and healthy aging that is so important to combine that. And we can talk about what is the next stage in your life, what are you going to do, and can we start businesses, and can we, we can do all these things. But if you're not healthy and fit enough to do those things, that is really where it starts. And obviously Deborah today, she just escaped because she always has on the hour the next yoga class to teach. She thanks you for being here, and a very interesting conversation as well. Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching, and later on also listening on our podcast, because there it will also be for you as listeners. If you have any questions, and please join us on the Wise Move Society, because this is what it's all about, and this is what we're dealing with, what we're building on, what we're creating, all these challenges and opportunities that we see, that we recognize, but also that we're working on. So join us, and love to see you soon for this next live conversation. Thank you again, everyone who was here today. Bye-bye.
Bye.